do you reckon Track Changes might be one of Taylor Swift's favourite podcasts?
I think that's what the evidence suggests, Murray. I mean, that's what it said, didn't it, in Spotify?
Yeah.
That's what the data says.
Yes, exactly. Well, not quite that, but what our anonymised annual data from Spotify about Track Changes told us was that the favourite music artist of the Track Changes listenership is Taylor Swift. So I'm just kind of wondering if you think, would Taylor Swift pay it back?
I think it's mutual.
Do you think it's likely?
I think it's mutual.
I think it's probably mutual.
Maybe she's listening right now. Thanks for your support.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Hello, Franziska Curran.
Hello, Murray Griffin. And Happy New Year, sort of. Happy January. Happy mid-January.
Yes. Happy mid-January to you.
It's really good to be back, Murray, and it's also an exciting year. We've got some changes ahead, don't we?
We do have some changes ahead in response basically to what we've been told by listeners and also some ideas that we've come up with. So I guess one of the most exciting things is that we're going to be starting augmenting Track Changes with a weekly mini podcast, which is going to sum up climate change and sustainability developments around Australia. So at the federal level, state and territory, each week, very short podcast, which I'm really looking forward to doing.
Me too. And also off the back of the work that we do, understanding what's happening, recording that in written form.
Yeah, exactly. So we will eventually augment the mini podcast with a weekly newsletter. So that's not too far off either, but the mini podcasts will start in the next week or so. And we're looking forward to seeing how those go. And also, Franziska, we have another open mic episode planned. So
we do.
Tell us about that.
We do indeed. Well, off the back of last year's open mic episode, which was extremely fun to record and also curate, we'll be doing another one shortly around the 2025 wins and successes. So we'd love to hear from people about what they thought was fantastic last year or their highlights of last year in the climate and sustainability space.
That would be terrific.
Have you got some ideas already, Murray?
Well,
of your wins?
I think what we would like people to talk about the big wins, but also those small wins that they've either achieved themselves or seen others achieve, either, or, at a personal level or at an organisational level or whatever. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes through, because it certainly was a very big year, 2025, which brings us to the topic of today's episode, which is what to look out for at the state and territory level in 2026
this year.
Yes. Yeah. So we're going to start our roundup shortly, but firstly we wanted to flag not one but two quizzes that we have for you in this episode. Right. And the first one, now, in terms of framing this one, Franziska, I have to ask you a question. What's the correct term? Is it coordinator generals, coordinators general, or coordinators generals? Which is it? I don't know.
Coordinator general?
Coordinator generals. Anyway, our quiz.
Collective noun for a group of coordinator generals.
Yes. Well, maybe.
Taking all answers.
Yeah, we will. But what we're going to, our question for you is, how many of them does it take to decarbonise Australia's economy? Because there's been some interesting developments on that front in 2025. We will be providing the answer to that question.
And we
Yes.
We will provide the answer mid-episode.
We will indeed. But then we also have another quiz, and we want listeners to guess how we respectively spent our Christmas holidays. How we spent our holiday break. So, Franziska, what are the two choices?
The two options.
The two options. Who did what? Yep.
Yeah, so one of us spent our holiday break mostly trekking in remote New Zealand, and one of us spent it mostly lying on the couch reading novels with 1960s Italian pop music songs playing in the background.
Yes.
Which one of us did which is the question that we will answer at the end.
I think that's extremely difficult for listeners. I mean,
It's
who
so
would it be?
tricky.
Am I the trekker? Am I on the, just reading on the couch?
On the couch
Very
with novels.
difficult.
Like, both sound like such wonderful ways to spend the New
spend the
Year
break.
time. Like, I would have trouble if I was planning it, choosing which one to do.
Absolutely. Okay, well, should we kick off?
Let's do it, Murray.
Let's do it. All right, and I'm going to start with Queensland. So let's get a bit of context on what happened in Queensland in 2025 before we move on to 2026. Now, as you know, Franziska, one of the most popular podcast genres is true crime. There's a lot of true crime podcasts. Mm-hmm. And I've got to say, I reckon Queensland's approach to climate law and policy would make great fodder for a standalone true crime podcast episode. For a start, thanks to a mix of
What a scathing review.
Well, yeah. Well, I think it's well deserved. For a start, thanks to a mix of ministerial orders and call-ins and legislative and regulatory changes that occurred in 2025, large-scale wind, solar and battery projects in that state now have complex requirements to satisfy before they can even lodge applications for environmental approval. And Queensland has also repealed the state's renewable energy targets. This year, that same mindset of slowing action on climate change will continue. But I think this year the focus will be maybe a bit less on hobbling renewables, which they've basically largely done, and more on streamlining and simplifying assessment and approval processes for fossil fuel projects. And Queensland's Resources and Mines Minister, Dale Last, has pretty much said as much. Last April, Minister Last said he had met with representatives from the coal and gas industry associations to discuss, quote, detailed targeted proposals focused on cutting delays and streamlining approvals. Now, clearly the coal and gas industries know what they will be, but we as yet don't. Then last August, Minister Last complained to a parliamentary estimates hearing that it was taking too long to approve coal projects in the state. He also noted that at the time there were 49 coal mining lease applications being dealt with by his department. So I think we can clearly expect to see a lot of roadblocks removed to get more coal projects up and running in Queensland. We've also already seen evidence that the Queensland government is giving special treatment to the state's coal industry. Last year, opposition leader Stephen Miles tabled a paper that concludes Adani had allegedly made royalty underpayments of almost $400 million. And Stephen Miles also noted that the LNP government had discontinued legal action about Adani's royalty payments, which had been initiated by the Queensland Revenue Office in early 2023. Under the former state government. Coal company Coronado is another example. Some people listening might have heard of Coronado's Curran coal mine at the start of this year in tragic circumstances because a worker was killed in an accident there. Incidentally, the same company had a fatality at one of its coal mines in the US in December. Coronado is in a poor financial position, but the Queensland government has agreed to give it a multi-million-dollar helping hand by last year paying about $116 million of taxpayer money upfront for coal that will be delivered to state-owned generation company Stanwell over the next 5 years. So there's two things to say about that. Firstly, just as an aside, there would be a lot of renewable energy companies that would like the luxury of a 5-year upfront payment of more than $100 million for power to be generated over the next 5 years, but there's zero chance of that happening. Secondly, Queensland's helping hand to Coronado might not be over yet, because Queensland has a scheme to ensure mining companies don't exit their operations without rehabilitating their sites. And last October, the official that administers that scheme gave preliminary advice to Coronado that it would need to provide a $242 million rehabilitation surety. But Coronado is currently seeking a review of that decision, and in a US filing late last year, it said it might not be able to secure a suitable bank guarantee or insurance bond facility if it has to pay the $242 million. And it's going to be interesting to see if the state government administered scheme sticks to requiring $242 million from the company, or whether it ends up with a reduced payment requirement. Okay, in other Queensland news, the state government will finalise a new 2025-2030 waste strategy this year. Unsurprisingly, unlike the existing version released by the former government in 2019, the draft waste strategy released last year makes no reference to greenhouse gas emissions or methane, which is quite extraordinary. The state government is also planning a review of the state's waste disposal levy arrangements this year. Other developments to watch out for in Queensland include passage of a bill to overhaul the state's framework environment law. If passed, the bill will greatly simplify environmental obligations for activities that are classified as low risk. And that's Queensland. Over to you, Franziska.
Well, how do you follow that? There was a lot, but
well, hopefully it was something that's a bit more cheerful, Franziska.
Yes, well, I'm delighted to be talking about New South Wales, actually. If you look at up-and-coming podcast genres for 2025, another one was self-improvement. Another one was health and fitness. These might be more applicable for New South Wales. So I'm excited
nicely done there,
take
Franziska.
you through this list. So the New South Wales EPA will this year finalise new requirements for environmental licence holders to prepare climate change mitigation and adaptation plans, which was consulted upon late last year and is currently under review. And alongside this, it will also finalise a proposed greenhouse gas mitigation guide for New South Wales coal mines, which was released mid last year too. Sidebar, obviously fugitive emissions are a significant part of New South Wales coal mines or coal mines in general, but I was also interested to see that this guide had a section on Scope 3.
Ah, yes.
New South Wales, yeah, it was interesting. Let's see if it stays in for the final. New South Wales will also update the state's overarching net zero plan to ensure it can meet its 2030 and 2035 targets. The plan will be wide-ranging, but will have a strong focus on the built environment and transport. New South Wales is also coordinating work with other interested states and territories in preparation for the review of the federal safeguard mechanism, which is expected to start this year, with a focus on how states can take steps that complement the federal safeguard. The New South Wales EPA last year also established climate change advisory groups covering the following areas of community and environment, mining and agriculture, and these are due to meet again early this year. New South Wales is also planning to establish a greenhouse gas monitoring network, starting in the coal mining area of the Upper Hunter. On the legislation front, the government's Future Jobs and Investment Bill is currently before Parliament and will be debated early this year. The bill would establish a Future Jobs and Investment Authority that would attract investment to coal regions to create new jobs, lead community engagement, and position workforce and supply chains to seize new opportunities. Local divisions of the authority will be set up in the Hunter, Central West, Illawarra, and the Northwest. That's an important development because shifting away from coal is a big deal for New South Wales. The state currently has 25,000 people directly employed in the coal industry. The state government is also expected to introduce legislation this year that will expand the state's renewable fuel certificate scheme, which will work broadly like the energy efficiency certificate scheme, creating tradable credits, so that it subsidises biomethane as well as hydrogen. In other news, from 1st of July this year, all new office buildings commissioned for or by the New South Wales government must be all electric. And New South Wales government agencies and departments will also preference all-electric office buildings for new leases in Greater Sydney. Meanwhile, the EPA is also expected to finalise a protection of the environment policy for sustainable construction after undertaking consultations early last year. One thing that won't be happening in New South Wales is an increase in the state's waste levy. The levy, which is charged for the disposal of waste to landfill, was under review last year. But Environment Minister Penny Sharp announced late last year that rates would be held at the current level for the 2026 to 2027 financial year. Finally, there are several parliamentary inquiries progressing in New South Wales. There is a state parliamentary inquiry into emissions from the fossil fuel sector, which will continue its deliberations this year. There's also a parliamentary inquiry into proposed energy from waste facilities, which will continue. So will another into modern slavery risks faced by migrant workers in regional New South Wales. And finally, so will another parliamentary inquiry into infrastructure for electric cars. So quite a lot going on in New South Wales. Let's travel to Victoria. Over to you, Murray.
That's great, Franziska. And as you say, definitely good material there for a wellness podcast. A nice contrast to Queensland. Okay, on to Victoria. In Victoria, the state's first offshore wind auction, which was originally intended to be held last year, might be held this year, although that's not a sure thing. Also this year, we get more clarity on how Victoria intends importing infrastructure for offshore wind farms. Victoria had originally intended making the Port of Hastings the offshore wind port for the state, but that plan was deemed environmentally unacceptable by the federal government. Currently, the state government is considering two options: a revised proposal for the Port of Hastings or a multi-port approach that would see offshore wind farm infrastructure imported via various ports, both in Victoria and elsewhere. On the transmission infrastructure front, the Western Renewables Link that will transport electricity from Western Victorian renewable energy zones to Melbourne won't start until 2027. But late this year, we can expect to see a planning scheme amendment that is essential before construction can start. It's also worth noting that AusNet, which is delivering the Western Renewables Link, has already committed $55 million to deliver benefits to regional communities along the proposed project route, with $14 million of this already made available. Meanwhile, there's one major transmission project that will start in 2026 in a sort of rudimentary form, in the form of very early work in both Victoria and Tasmania for the Marinus interconnector between Tasmania and Victoria. Meanwhile, the Victorian government will this year finalise 5 renewable energy zone orders and a shoreline zone order for Gippsland. The orders are currently out in draft form, with comments due towards the end of this month. On the legislative front, it might come as a surprise to some people, but the Victorian government currently has a gas bill before Parliament to, and I'm quoting here, support the improvement and expansion of Victoria's declared gas transmission system in the interests of ongoing security and reliability. The bill would establish a ministerial power to make orders regarding the construction of critical pipeline infrastructure projects, with the aim of preventing delays that could jeopardise energy security. Meanwhile, a parliamentary inquiry into decommissioning offshore oil and gas infrastructure is underway and held its first hearing in December last year. And just as an aside, I would highly recommend that anybody interested in the issue of decommissioning should read the very first piece of draft transcript from that hearing, which is currently up on the Victorian government website.
It's a good read, Murray?
It's a very good read. It's a very good read. I can't quote it because it says, draft text to do not quote, but it makes some references to one very well-known offshore oil and gas operator. Okay, so meanwhile, on the residential front, from early this year, home insulation retrofits will be subsidised through the state's Energy Upgrades Energy Efficiency Scheme, which is a very welcome move. And one more thing, not so welcome. While the New South Wales EPA is currently very active on the climate change front, the same can't be said of the EPA Victoria. EPA Victoria's latest annual report gives no indication that the agency is undertaking or contemplating regulatory activities to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of its licensees. Finally, coming up in November in Victoria will be a state election, which could be a very closely run race. One thing of interest to watch for in the run-up to the election is what climate and environment policies the coalition takes to the state election. Will it go down the Queensland LNP path and talk the talk in the lead-up to the election, and then dismantle all the good policies if it wins? Or will it in fact carry through? There are some signs that its approach could be quite destructive, with the Victorian coalition undertaking under its previous leader to dismantle the government-owned State Electricity Commission and to also dismantle legislation designed to speed the approval of large-scale renewables. But intriguingly, the new opposition leader, Jess Wilson, has renamed the shadow energy portfolio as a shadow energy and emissions reduction portfolio. Time will tell whether that's simply a window dressing move or a sign of a commitment to action. And that's Victoria. Over to you, Franziska.
We're now travelling on to Tasmania. One thing that it would be good to see in Tasmania, though there's no sign of it so far, is a review of the state's framework environmental law known as the EMPCA, the Environmental Management and Pollution Control Act. Tasmania's Auditor-General last year said that the Act is overdue for review and, I quote, is no longer fit for purpose in addressing the complexity of contemporary environmental management, including landfill regulation. The Auditor-General also noted that a review of EMPCA was supposed to start in 2019, but never went ahead. In terms of what will happen in Tasmania, a review is already underway of Tasmania's Climate Change State Action Act, and this is expected to be finalised this year. We can also expect to see the completion of a feasibility study for a common user processing facility for critical minerals. The study, which was federally funded, will focus on tin and tungsten in the state's northwest. Over to you in South Australia, Murray.
Okay, well, here we are in South Australia, and a state election is due to take place in March, with the current Labor government expected to be returned to office. Now, perhaps the most interesting legislative development in South Australia is a climate bill that was introduced last year, not by the government, but by an independent. The Climate Change Intergenerational Equity Amendment Bill would require the health and well-being of children and future generations to be considered when decisions are made that are likely to contribute to climate change. It was introduced by an independent member of the upper house and a former Greens politician, Tammy Franks, and the South Australian opposition has already said it opposes it. But Labor upper house politician and former state environment minister, Ian Hunter, has left the door open to the possibility of the South Australian government supporting the bill. It would be a significant advance of if the legislation were to get up, as a similar bill last year failed at the federal level. Meanwhile, a key task for the South Australian government this year will be bedding down the Biodiversity Act that was introduced last year. And the task this year will be introducing the supporting regulations and statutes. In other news, the state will also be awarding contracts following the inaugural tender under its new Firm Energy Reliability Mechanism, known as FIRM. The tender will target 700 megawatts of battery storage and other firming capacity. Over to you, Franziska.
FIRM has got to be the best acronym. FERM, very good.
I think we have to give them the prize for the best acronym of 2025. There'd be a lot of contenders for the worst, but anyway, yeah. Okay, what's going on in WA, Franziska?
So, slight sidebar, sorry, Murray.
Yeah,
the Climate Change Intergenerational Equity Amendment Bill. That sounds really interesting. Do you know how it differs from the similar bill that didn't go through at the federal level that you mentioned?
I haven't taken a close look at it, but my understanding is that it doesn't differ very much. So this would be a foot in the door for this kind of legislation. And hopefully it will get up. It would be great to see it become law, because it would then obviously, be a template for other states to pick up, similar laws.
Awesome. And now might be the time to answer the quiz question of how many coordinated generals there are.
Yes. How many it takes to decarbonise an economy?
I haven't counted.
The answer seems to be quite a few, because, we've had one in Queensland for quite a while. There is last year one was established in the Northern Territory.
NT, yep.
Yep.
And now
and last December, late last month, I think you're probably going to mention it shortly, but the one was established in WA as well. And also the Productivity Commission's Net Zero report, which came out late last month, it recommended that something similar be established at the federal level. And I guess the common thinking with all those things is that big projects need, they need as much support as they can get. And we're going to need that sort of support to get clean economy projects up and running. Of course, the big proviso is that the Northern Territory Coordinator-General, who previously worked for LNG company Inpex, obviously the big focus for him is probably going to be Beetaloo Basin gas, although also projects like Sun Cable. Anyway, so yes, this Coordinator General's popping up everywhere.
Yep. And Murray, as we move on to Western Australia, late last December, the State Development Bill was passed by the WA Parliament, which established the Office of the Coordinator General, who will ensure state significant projects are expedited. As you said, as you'd implied, the Coordinator General's office is likely to benefit large renewable energy, but also defence and critical minerals projects in particular. You also mentioned, as mentioned, a similar office has existed in Queensland for some time and was established in the Northern Territory last year. Most controversially, the new WA law empowers the relevant minister, with the Premier's approval, to unilaterally amend or exclude the application of existing provisions of some acts to a particular project, subject to some guardrails. It is worth noting that similar powers to override existing legislation also exist in the establishing legislation for the offices of Coordinator General in both Queensland and the Northern Territory. Meanwhile, Western Australia is this year expected to finalise a simplified payment model for major energy projects requiring a connection to Western Australia's main energy grid. The Western Australian Government is also in the process of developing an advanced biofuels strategy for the state. Okay, and I'm going to roll straight into the Northern Territory now. And in the Northern Territory, the NT Government has abandoned a 43% emission reduction target for 2030 and has also abandoned the previous 2030 renewable energy target of 50% renewables. Meanwhile, the NT Government is actively backing the development of a multi-user carbon capture and storage hub at Darwin. This includes its encouragement for Vopak to develop a CO2 import terminal at Middle Arm. And finally, the NT Government is also pulling out all stops to develop fossil gas production in the Beetaloo Basin. And that takes us all around Australia.
It does indeed. Quite a fast trip, quite a fast clip. And it's obviously shaping up to be a very big and interesting year because we haven't even touched upon what's going on at the federal level. Now, people are on tenterhooks, Franziska.
I know they've been. It's the suspense has carried them this whole.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Who went on the trek? Who lay on the couch reading novels, listening to Italian pop? Do you want to do the big reveal?
Drum roll, please.
Yeah.
It was me in New Zealand. And it was Murray with excellent taste in music, excellent taste in novels, having a luxurious time. I would do it too, Murray. Maybe that's my next year.
So where in New Zealand would you recommend that people go trekking? What's your advice?
Anywhere outside of Queenstown in the usual, the Rees Dart track or the Greenstone Cables or the Root Burn, they're all really beautiful and beautiful in any summer weather. We had some incredible amounts of rain, which just made waterfalls pour out of the mountains. It was really stunning.
Sounds good.
Do you have a novel recommendation?
I do have a novel. Yeah. I do have a book recommendation, and I'm going to recommend a particular 1960s Italian pop song. So my book recommendation is I Want Everything. I think the author is Dominic Rivera or Riviera. Anyway, the title of the book is I Want Everything, and it's set in Melbourne. It's I don't want to give too much away.
Read?
There's a lot of
Is it the kind of read that you can it's like candy, like eat through and you're like one sitting, or is it something you need to process? And, a bit more like...
There's quite a lot of very mean characters. So,
Oh.
but you don't come to the end of the book thinking, I shouldn't have really, engaged in those characters' lives. But yes, it's, and honestly, for anybody who does live in Melbourne, it's just, there's a lot of Melbourne stuff in there. Highly recommended. Very good plot.
I do love that when you engage in a book and you know the places they're talking about, and like there's a lot with Trent Dalton's books in Brisbane, and being able to sort of like know the streets and
No, it's actually it's very like that, And I will drop the book title and author into the show notes, but also I'm going to drop into the show notes my favorite 1960s Italian pop song, which is by Italian hearthrob crooner Bobby Solo, and it's called Una Lacrima Sul Viso. Excuse my Italian there, but I think you listened to it, Franziska, and I think you were impressed.
I have listened to it. I do like it. I'm very impressed. Great.
Yeah. So who knows? Next year's holiday break,
we could switch.
We could switch. I might be trekking in New Zealand. You might be on the couch reading novels. Anyway,
who knows?
Thanks very much.
Wait till next year to find out.
Thanks very much for listening to us, and I hope that update has been of interest. Keep in mind, we are starting a weekly mini podcast in the next week or so, which will be a weekly roundup of what's going on.
Oh, and we'll also be putting a call out for contributions to our next open mic episode on successes and wins of 2025.
We will indeed. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.